الشعب اللي تمشى بالحفاظ عالشوق عجلي وعلى النار.
بن بولعيد واسمو مصطفى علي لابوانت وبدي عمر. القصبة ما زالها واقفة وما زالوا عساس الدار، ما زالها سعلة السقيفة وما زالها حرمة الجار. أنا يا بلادي راني عارف هما ما كانوش عارفين،
دهشوا نهار علي ما توقف، احنا عادتنا نموت واقفين. نموت على النيف والشرف، نموت على الوطن والدين، علمنا بلا ريح يرفرف، احنا هما الجزائريين. أنا يا بلادي على بالي هما ما كانوش فاهمين،
حبوا يديو البلاد ديالي حسبونا ماناش قادرين. فكتهم حسيبة بنبوعلي الجميلة تونسى الأخرين، من حقك يا الجزائر تولولي ولدي نساو رجال حرين. أنا يا بلادي سمحيلي ما قدرتش نذكرهم كاملين،
واش نذكر واش نخلي شهداء رواحهم طاهرين، مازالهم في قلبي وفي بالي، ربي يرحمهم أجمعين. والقصبة مازالها ديالي وسط الدار والعرس واقفين.
معليش يا القصبة وريلهم
قرصان رياس وساطيل، على عروج وخير الدين احكي لهم،
وفهم الناس اللي جاهلين
واللي الجزائر ما هيش ليهم، ولادها مازالهم عايشين في وسط الناس. كيفاش تعرفهم في الشدة ديما متحدين،
باللي الجزائر ماشي ديالهم ولادها مازالهم عايشين في وسط الناس. كيفاش تعرفهم في الشدة ديما متحدين.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome again to Jazair Hope broadcast. Today we have a different topic, still related to Algeria, but definitely a different topic. As you can see from the scrolling title, it's about the history of Lalla Fadhma N'Soumeur that you all know, but it is about a game that has been developed in America, telling the story of Lalla Fadhma N'Soumeur. And for the purpose, we are delighted and extremely honored to have with us Roberta Taylor. Roberta Taylor is lead game designer, but she is lead game of Lalla Fadhma N'Soumeur game in particular. So Roberta, thank you very much for accepting to be with us this evening.
You're welcome. It's great to be here.
So before we start, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, we will not be talking about the history of Algeria, but we will relate to it through this game. And for that purpose, I would like to share with you a short video about Lalla, the history of Lalla Fadhma N'Soumeur that we will see together. So a video is in Arabic, but you can put subtitles either in French or in English. So it's this one.
للا فاطمة نسومر قائدة الجرجرة، انزادت عام 1830 في منطقة تيزي وزو. كانت مسلالة مشهورة تاع الشرفة اللي عندهم زاوية في دشرة سومر. قرات في المدرسة تاع باباها ويقولوا باللي جمالها كان يفوق الخيال، عليها حبوا يزوجوها بكري. بصح للا فاطمة كانت ترفض كل خطة بيدقدق على الباب. باباها صبر حتى حتم عليها باش تتزوج من وليد عمها. ما طولتش بزاف معاه وهربت عند خاوتها. ما عرفوش اش يديروا معاها، تقرروا يدوها للزاوية تاع باباهم تواصل عبادة الله وتعاون الفقراء والمحتاجين. وبالعقل ولات مشهورة بالتقوى ديالها وذكائها، ودخلت حتى مع جماعة الشيوخة وكلامها ولا مسموع. وكي لحق الاستعمار الفرنسي لجبال الجرجرة بدأت تتوجد للمقاومة، وبدراهم الزاوية شرت السلاح وبعثت رسائل تنادي فيهم للجهاد لكل قبائل المنطقة. وهكذا ولات لالا فاطمة نسومر حاكمة جيش تاع 1000 راجل، ادتهم في معارك كبار ضد المقاومة الفرنسية. غلبت شحال من مرة الماريشال غوندون وما خلاتوش يدخل المنطقة مدة 3 سنين. بصح في عام 1857 الماريشال غوندون هجم فجأة على بلاد قبائل على خاطر بيعولوا بالتخبيات على لالا فاطمة نسومر، وين بين ليلة ونهار لقات روحها محصورة. كانت خايفة على مصير الشعب ديالها خاصة النساء، وكي فهمت بلي كانت رايحة تخسر الحرب قررت تسلم روحها وداوها عند الماريشال غوندون اللي كان حي بيشوف هاد المرأة اللي حارباته. قال لها: وعلاش تحاربي على جل هاد الجبال الناشفة؟ جاوبته هي تقول: هاد الجبال علمونا الشرف. الاستعمار الفرنسي ادى كامل الثروة تاع زاوية سومر وحرقوا كامل الكتابات تاع الدين والعلوم، وسجنوا لالا فاطمة نسومر في زاوية طابلات تحت وصاية البشغ الخاين طاهر بن محي الدين. جوزت هكا 6 سنين مسجونة حتى ماتت بالحزن على بلادها اللي كانت تسقط بكمالها في يد فرنسا. كان في عمرها 33 عام. اليوم لالا فاطمة نسومر مدفونة ما بين الشهداء في العالية. وبحكاية الزمان نقول الله يرحم الشهداء، وموعدنا بكم يكون غدا في قعدة فيها إن شاء الله فايدة وسعادة.
So how as you have seen in this small and short historical video about Lalla Fadhma N'Soumeur, and I don't know if you have noticed actually in the broadcast, in the announcement of this live, it was said that it was exactly on the 11th of July, a day like yesterday, then that Lalla Fadhma N'Soumeur and the other and her group who resisted to the French colonization was ultimately and eventually beaten. So it was exactly a day like yesterday in the 1857 year. So Roberta, just to before entering in our subject today, I would like just you introduce yourself to our audience and what you have been doing in addition to this game about Lalla Fadhma N'Soumeur.
For sure. So, my name's Roberta, and I live in Edmonton, Alberta, which is in Canada, a lot north from where most of you probably are. And I actually design board games is my full-time career. And most of the games that I make are either family games for families who want to play games like with their children or their friends, or I'm also very interested in games that are about sort of historical or educational topics, not necessarily to use in schools, but because I think we can learn something even just playing things together. And games can be such a great way to really engage with a topic. And so yeah, that's what I do. And in my spare time, I like to, read books and tend my garden and all those good things.
Thank you very much. And in fact, it is really a great opportunity to speak to someone like you, because I don't know, as far as I'm concerned, about people in Algeria working in this field. So it is really a great opportunity to talk to a subject matter expert, and in particular, someone who has worked on something related to Algeria, as important as the history of Fadhma N'Soumeur. So this take me to start the discussion about the Fadhma N'Soumeur game. If you can tell us how, from where it stemmed, so how the idea came in, who was the lead who came up with this idea, just to start with.
For sure. So this game was designed along with Matt Shoemaker, who's actually also the publisher. It's just a little tiny game publisher that he runs, and he had he's a librarian at a university in the United States, and he was very interested in also in historical war games, which are a big hobby, but they're kind of an interesting hobby in that they haven't changed for a long time, so that there are very few younger people and very, very few women who play these games. And Matt had studied about the French colonization of Algeria when he had done some of his work for his thesis years ago, and he thought this would be a really good topic to make a game for this war game audience about, because it's so centered on these communities resisting being led specifically by a woman. And so he started to look around for someone who could work on the game with him. And of course, he first looked to see if he could find any Algerian designers or people who could contribute. But as you said, we're not aware of anyone from Algeria doing this, and he wasn't able. And so then he said, okay, well, at least I need to have a woman on this, because it's a game about a woman doing this, and he wanted to have a very feminist perspective. And so I said, like, I mean, I'm Canadian. I don't know much about this, but I am a game designer. I'm a woman, and I'm super interested in this and really willing to learn. And so we started working together there, and I spent the first 3 months of the project just reading everything we could historically about this. And of course, that's such a challenge.
Yeah, we'll get, thank you very much, Roberta. I'm sorry to interrupt you. We'll get into those details. But before we progress, I wanted to inform our audience also that there is a movie about Lalla Fadhma N'Soumeur that I will display a short trailer of it. It's this one. So it's short one, but it's very interesting to know.
1850. 20 ans se sont écoulés depuis l'invasion française de l'Algérie, et la Kabylie reste insoumise. L'armée coloniale se lance à son assaut, mais la résistance est farouche. À la tête de cette résistance, une femme, Fadhma N'Soumeur. Un film de Bolqasem Hadjadj sur cette femme exceptionnelle qui a marqué l'histoire sera à l'affiche à partir du 16 octobre 2014 dans les salles de cinéma à Alger, Tizi Ouzou, Bouira, Béjaïa, Betna, Souqahras, Khanchla, Oran, Tlemcen, Sidi Bel Abbès, Saïda et Tiaret.
Sorry, I just noticed that my mic was muted. I'm really sorry for that. So very quickly, I was saying that we have, as usual, we have put a poll. We would like you to answer it. It's about if you think there is enough educational games about the history, culture, and the heritage of Algeria, and you have three choices. So the first one, you think yes, there are enough games. Second, no, you don't think there are enough games, and you think that the responsibility is on the government or on the state. Or the third answer, you still think there are not enough games, and this time you think it's the responsibility is on the elite or people, subject matter experts on the field to take initiative to create games about the history of Algeria. So, and then back to you, Roberta, to tell us a little bit in more details how this game was built.
For sure. We sure would have liked to get our hands on that movie. We looked so hard. So it was lots of reading, all historical newspapers and old accounts and stuff. But of course, all of the written stuff was written by the French. And so trying to get the perspective of the Kabyle people as we did this was really challenging. Thankfully, Matt had found us a cultural consultant from Algeria, works at a university there. So when we ran into questions, we had someone who really understood that could answer that, because it was really important to us to respect the story we were telling as best as possible, because of course it's not our story, but it's still an important one. And so once I kind of understood what was happening, my next big challenge was, when you create a game, you need to have a victory condition. How do you win when you play this game? And realized really quickly that was going to be a challenge, because it was really important to us that you not be able to play the French, the colonizers. Because when you take the role of a character in a game, you're really building empathy there. And we didn't want a game that glorified colonialism in any way. And so ended up deciding, okay, historically, Fadhma N'Soumeur was captured in July. Let's say that the win condition is if you can last out the summer without getting captured, that would be a win condition. And so from there, we went on to figure out, okay, how to do this, had to develop a map, spent a lot of time looking at satellite images of the Jura Mountains to understand how that would have been. And then the way that we ended up with the game is the players play groups of villages in the region, and the French are played, there's just a deck of cards, and every couple turns, depending on how many players are in the game, a card representing the French armies is turned over, and the game just sort of acts on its own, and the players are then trying to use their resources to push back against that. And unlike a lot of war games, you don't just have soldiers, you don't just have mujahideen and guns and whatever. You also have women and children, and you have olive orchards and things that would be important to whole communities. You have elders who contribute, but in a different way. And so we really wanted to give that sense of like this was a whole people's way of life, and the whole community was ultimately involved in this conflict.
Great, but a question that maybe I should have asked before this is why is such game about an Algerian hero, an Algerian history? So do you think that it was going to attract enough attention? So I was wondering, from the perspective of its success within the public, how you thought about this?
For sure. So Matt's vision for this game was, he didn't expect it to be like the most successful game ever, but what he wanted to do was start some important conversations in the war game community, and it absolutely succeeded at that. We actually presented about this game at the North American War Game Conference in Montreal. We were in Montreal just before the pandemic started. And there's people from the wargaming community and from the US and Canadian military there. And we were like saying, hey, we think it's important to think about these games in a different light. And that started some really good conversations. And then for the general public who are interested in this type of games, it has been really well received in that people who play it are like, oh, this is really neat. Like, I really liked how this told this story, and they really engaged well with it. But it was never expected to make, like, I imagine that, you know, the publisher made enough to cover his expenses and maybe, you know, take his wife out to dinner, but he never got rich off it.
No, for sure. I'm sure that is the case because, yeah, it is the case with this kind of project. And we will talk about a little bit more about the commercial aspects of such initiatives later on. Well, I need to congratulate you because, as you said, it at least triggered some kind of discussions, and it went to forums like universities and so on. And the purpose of this discussion is to create similar engagement, hopefully in Algeria. So maybe people in Algeria will be more interested into this. They will think about other games, maybe translating it to French or Arabic and so on. So that is one of the objectives of such discussion. Coming back to the game, Roberta, how is it played? What is the winner? So how someone win the game, and what is the ultimate message? Because I guess in each game there is a message, or at least the good ones.
For sure. So the game is played. There's a map of the region, and like I mentioned earlier, each player controls. If you're playing, for example, 3 players at the table, each player would control a region of 3 villages and sort of be responsible for making sure that those are protected. And that the way that's done is essentially using cards. You start with some, you can add more to your personal supply of cards as the game continues. And you're choosing which one of those to use and how to use them in order to whether it's to build defenses or to recruit mujahideen, or whether it's to plant new orchards or different things that you might do, are all represented through the cards that you're going to play. And as the French army moves across the board, you can play cards, so for example, to ambush them and try to like drive them out, and sort of looking at historical ways how that resistance would have happened and trying to replicate that using hand management, card management. And as I said, if you manage to get through the summer in the game mechanics, which is when the deck of the French army runs out, then you would be considered victorious. And so, yeah, that's kind of how the gameplay works.
Okay.
And sorry, I've lost the other half of your question.
Yeah, I am meanwhile displaying a few images from Google for our audience to see about the game. So basically, it's as you can see, it's a board game, or similar to for example Monopoly, the one that most of us know, but. Yeah, so it's very interesting to have a look to this game. We have published in our website an article about this game, so you can find enough references about it in the web. Roberta, one last question about this game, and if you would like to elaborate about how successful it is. So what was the end message that this game wants to tell to the players?
For sure. That's a really great question. I think that what we really wanted to highlight was, I mean, firstly, we wanted a game that really made people realize that a lot of the way colonization happened all over the world was really awful. And I mean, that's not terribly hard to do because as soon as you start looking at it, you see. But also we really wanted to highlight the fact that the wars aren't separate from people. Like, it's not just some men go off and fight over here and everyone waits till it's over. It really was a thing that impacted all these communities, that changed a way of life hugely. And I think it was important to tell that story, and to tell a story of how the communities, like, when they come together, like, they have such strength. And you can look at this and you've got in your hand maybe a card that's a child and a card that's a woman or an older man, and they're useful, even though they're maybe not the ones carrying the rifles. And we really wanted to look at this from, so often when these stories are told, there's voices that we don't hear. Like, we don't hear what it was like to be, you know, an old woman, or a young woman for that matter, or, you know, a child, maybe a boy who's 10 years old and not old enough to go off. And we wanted to just remind, like, players, like, this really is, there's a lot of voices here, and maybe stop for a minute and think about all of them.
Great. Thank you, Roberta. And ladies and gentlemen, if you have any question, please do not hesitate to ask. We'll try to answer those that are not discussed meanwhile at the end of the talk. One last question on the game, Roberta, about technically how long it took, how many people it took, about its commercial success, or I know it's a bit early to talk about this because it's few months back that it was made public, but just few technical aspects about the outcome of the game.
Sure. So I can speak a lot to the creation. I don't have a lot of specifics about how many copies were sold or any of that. But we started working on the project in August, and I handed off my work on the prototype to the publisher in about March of the following year. So 6 or 7 months of working on the game, trying different things, playing with people, changing it up, all of those things. And then, of course, he worked very closely with the artists, who all of the art in the game are watercolors done by an Algerian artist, whose name I had. Where is it? It's right here. Asen Blibek.
Okay.
I think that's right. Anyways, he did a wonderful job, and a lot of pieces that had to be created for that. And then there's graphic designers and editors to make, like, that worked on that end of the project. And then once that's all together, then the files are sent off to the factory, and off you go. And this game was funded through a crowdfunding platform, was done using Kickstarter. So people who are interested in the game could back it there. And that's how he got the funds to pay for having it printed and delivered to everyone.
I think you should send a small email to Hassan Blibek, letting him know about this broadcast. I think he will like to see it. So, and for that purpose, we send him our regards, and we thank him for taking part of this very nice project. So you just mentioned about crowdfunding. In general, this is the way how such projects are funded. And what do you know how much it was, at least initially, raised for the execution of such project, if you know that, of course?
I'd have to go back to Kickstarter and check.
Well, it's not very important, but
yeah.
Is this the way that in general this kind of projects are executed? So it goes through crowdfunding, or?
It's really common especially for smaller publishers, to use crowdfunding. One is that it lets them get their project out in front of the people who might be interested in it without having to have a lot of capital, because the upfront cost of doing a game could be quite high. So usually they've got a completed product that's just basically ready to go to the factory to get printed when they do the crowdfunding. And the other thing is that actually crowdfunding itself can be a really good tool for marketing, for getting people who maybe hadn't heard of it will stumble across it through conversations about that campaign at that time. So yeah, in the board game industry, it's very common.
Great. So, and for our people, I'm asking this question so that at the end we will be speaking about a particular project we are thinking about in Jazair Hope. It's related to the creation of a game. So we'll let you know a little bit more at the end of this discussion. Now, Roberta, my next question is about not specific to this game, but in general to the game industry. How is it going? How is it doing? Particularly in relation to the development of digital games, which I guess are much more attractive than analog games for obvious reasons. So how this industry is going on?
It's actually really interesting because the board game industry, sort of tabletop games, have actually continued to increase in popularity and increase in market share very steadily for a long time now. And I actually think that that's a pushback against digital games and the fact that a lot of people go to their office, they spend their day in front of a computer, the kids use computers at school, they come home, they play video games, and they want to spend time together. And sitting down around a tabletop game gives them a reason to do something that isn't looking at a screen, that isn't digital. And I think that's probably part of why we're seeing this is actually growing immensely and continues to do that. And we're seeing a lot more diversity in who's making games and in what type of games are being made. It's no longer sort of, in a large part, just, middle-aged white men playing games. Now it's like all sorts of people from all sorts of places. And so it's actually really exciting to be a part of that and just see, anytime you can bring people together and they're building that connection, that you can be a part of that, that's just really a privilege.
Absolutely. And what is the target audience apart from individuals or families who are interested into buying such games? Do you see, for example, museums, schools, and other institutions like asking for such games or buying them to share them among the students or in the schools or in the museums? Do you see such things happening?
To some degree, there's definitely a growing interest in games designed for use in classrooms. Those usually need to look a little different than a game designed to play at home with your family, for example, because teachers have a whole classroom of students and they have limited time available each time. So those games are usually designed specifically for the classroom, but that's growing. And I mean, again, museums, if the game is topical, they're very interested in that. If there's a great game about dinosaurs, then a museum that has a dinosaur exhibit might want that, for example, and sometimes just to sell in their gift shop, but sometimes to use as part of the exhibit. I have a friend who designed a game about the Northwest Passage, which is like north of North America, all in the ice there. To get through the water, the early explorers would try to figure out, could they get boats through there? And he designed this game that ended up being put in the Canadian Museum of Civilization as part of their exhibits because it told that part of history so well. But in general, I think the vast majority of the market I deal with is more, families or people, hobby gamers at home. But I only see one part of it. Like there's this huge people doing all sorts of things in all sorts of spaces for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are now at a little bit more than the half of the time, and we will talk about our next topic, which is, as I said, a project that we are thinking of in Jazair Hope to execute. And before that, I will share with you the background which is, as you might guess, is our book, Jazair Hope book, the history of Algeria in 54 objects, for which we have published recently a 2.5 minute video that I will share with you again here.
Comment raconter l'histoire de l'Algérie? S'inspirant du best-seller du British Museum The History of the World in 100 Objects et commémorant le déclenchement de la Révolution, l'équipe de Jazair Hope a choisi de le faire en 54 objets. Des objets de la préhistoire jusqu'à aujourd'hui. Modestes ou majestueux, simples documents ou œuvres d'art, ces objets portent en eux l'histoire de l'Algérie. De la mâchoire de l'homme de Tirnif à la fresque du Grand-Dieu, de la livre sterling de Gibraltar à la note de musique algérienne, voyagez à travers les âges et notre territoire pour découvrir notre récit commun. Découvrez comment les livres L'âne d'or, le traité de la musique et Noces de Mercure et philologie ont été écrits par 3 illustres savants algériens de l'université la plus ancienne d'Afrique de Mador, aujourd'hui M'Daourouch dans la wilaya de Soukaras. Plongez dans l'art du cubisme de Picasso à travers sa toile Les femmes d'Alger, vendue à 179 millions d'euros, pour découvrir qu'il a été inspiré par une orpheline algérienne, Baya Mahieddine, reconnue aujourd'hui par les plus grandes universités comme créatrice de l'art algérien, le bayaïsme. Percez les mystères de la parure de Tin Hinan, reine symbole du courage et dignité de la femme algérienne à travers le temps. Ou encore déchiffrer le plan de la Smala de l'émir Abdelkader pour comprendre l'organisation et la stratégie de défense d'une ville qui se déplace en permanence. Rêvez du nœud d'amour algérien, bijou traditionnel, création des marins algériens du XVIIIe siècle, porté par une star d'Hollywood dans le film James Bond, Casino Royale. Le canon Baba Merzoug, le Coran de Taha Libia, la guillotine de la prison Barberousse, la statue du Docker, l'affiche du cirque Hamar, le pendentif porte-Coran de la tribu des Haïténi, la bague Cladag, l'armoirie d'Alger, etc. Derrière chacun de ces objets se cache une histoire à raconter pour éterniser notre patrimoine. Emparez-vous du socle de défense de notre histoire, l'histoire de l'Algérie en 54 objets sur Amazon. Et offrez-le à vos enfants.
Again, I forgot to open my mic. So I was saying, this book, ladies and gentlemen, is the only way Jazair Hope try to fund its activities and its growth. We don't monetize our YouTube talks. We don't monetize our website. So we try to come up with initiatives, produce products, and sell them to fund our growth. As you know, we are a non-profit organization, and whatever proceeds of this book is reinvested into the platform in whatever way. And in that perspective, when I popped up on the Red Burnous game, and I was really delighted to see such thing. Of course, more delighted that it was done by non-Algerians. And I started looking around until I popped up on the profile of Roberta, and I take her again to be among us tonight. And the idea came to maybe do a game around our book, The History of Algeria in 54 Objects. As certainly you know, the book of The History of Algeria of 54 Objects was a group, collaborative work. So the team of Jazair Hope took over themselves to produce such book. It is inspired by a book that was published by the British Museum, The History of the World in 100 Objects. And here it is available to all of us. So, Roberta, is it a good idea to think about a game around this book, telling the history of Algeria through objects? So that was one of the reasons that I reached out to you for.
You know, I think that there's a lot to be said about using a game to introduce ideas and to start conversations. And you know, you've already curated this set of objects that sort of cover a lot of the history. And so the step from there to making that into a game, you know, it's certainly relatively logical one. And the big challenge with that is narrowing down, you know, who's the game for and what kind of game experience we want people to have, because it's very, the possibilities are very vast.
So I'm trying to push you. I know it's not obvious to answer such questions in live like this and on short time period. So if we would like to go ahead and work on such a project, what do you think we should think of in terms of resources, time? What will be the steps of such project? And I'm asking you this question because maybe at certain point of time I will ask our audience for support in whatever way.
Yeah, for sure. So ultimately, the biggest, I mean, you, like I said, you've got this body of work that you've already done, and so the biggest thing is then specifically being like, okay, we really think the most important demographic, for example, might be, you know, kids maybe ages 10 to 16 or something. Like, you're going to sort of narrow that down and be like, you know, we want this or these things from it. And then it's a matter of, like, from a designer's point of view then of taking all that and mushing it together and thinking about it and trying ideas until you come out with something that is going to tell that story, going to use that information, but is going to do it in a way that's really fun and really engaging for that target audience. And depending on the project, you know, that can take, it's hard to put a number of hours on it, but there's, you know, some amount of time, obviously. And then again, you have some assets from your book. So you may not need to have a lot of art created. You may decide you want to have an artist do all that, like do art for a game, so it's all done in one style, or you may be able to repurpose. And then of course, you know, you have to have someone who knows to do graphic design and those types of things. But ultimately, it's definitely a far smaller team needed than if you were going to try to do a video game, because the skills required are a lot less high tech, and generally you need fewer folks.
And okay, you said it will need some time, but is it less than a year to let's say?
Yeah, I would think so. Like, and one of the things with a project like this is depending on how people engage with, like, as a designer, I can put together a timeline and be like, okay, it's going to take me 3 or 4 weeks to come up with an initial idea and test it. And then I'm going to get it back to you and you're going to give me feedback, and I'm going to make changes based on that feedback. And then I'll need, you know, another whatever. And so there's a couple points in the process always where that timeline is impacted by how quickly, you know, a client would get back to me. But in general, for something like if we're looking at, especially for a game that's really accessible for youth or for families, it's absolutely reasonable to be ready to go to print within a year. And then, of course, you're just constrained by timelines of whatever printing partner you use.
Great. And one last game about this. I spoke about just to give us an idea. For example, is it like working only with a designer, or we will need to have more people into creating this project? So this is one question. And the second question: what kind of forms this game can look like? Is it like a board game or a card game? What are the most popular games you see around?
So the first part of your question, like for the actual like how to play the game, the rules, what is in the box kind of stuff, like that, as a designer, I do all that. And then the parts where, I hand off are graphic design, art, the logistics of publish, like the printing, all of that. That's not what I would know. So that's where other people generally come in. As far as what type of game, generally try to fit the game I make to tell the story that we're trying to tell the best possible way. So it's very possible we could make a game that's great, that's just cards, or it could be that we're like, hey, like, but if we add in a board and like some movers, or people can like, have pawns on the board or something, maybe that makes it better. But one of the things that I'm really accustomed to doing is working with constraints. Like when someone comes to me and they're like, I need a game for this, but it can only be cards. It has to be played in this length of time because it's a classroom. The reading level has to be this because it's children, like things like that. And so the trick really is just looking at how do we do this in a way that makes our audience excited to play it again after we've showed them. And there's sort of thinking about this project from like a distant, what would I do if I was doing it level? I think that there's potential to do some cool stuff with a card only game, which as an advantage is much more affordable to produce. And so that can be really helpful for an organization, but it's really the sky's the limit. You can get as simple or as complicated as you want with something like this.
Thank you very much, Roberta. I think this is extremely helpful, and definitely I will continue the discussion with you. I have seen a few questions from few people who are not clear about what we are talking about. So we are talking about two things. In the first part of the live, we spoke about a game that is already existing, that is already done by in America by a team there, and which was done by and Roberta was lead designer of that game, which is the subject of our live today. The game is called the Bernus. It's about Lalla Fadhma N'Soumeur history. And the second part we are discussing about now is the opportunity or the idea of creating a game around the book of XIXe Hope that I just showed the video about. This one that is on the screen. I will play it again without sound so that you have an idea. So we were discussing about the opportunity of creating a game which replicates the content of XIXe Hope book, the history of the world in 54 objects. And I thank Roberta for her answer. So I will definitely continue the discussion with her and see about the feasibility of such initiative. Definitely, one of the biggest problem will be the funding. In terms of resources, I can take on myself a lot of work, but anyway, we will look at the details later on. Roberta, we are almost at the end of the hour. As I said in the very beginning, we have asked that question about what people think about if there is enough such games, educational games about the history, the culture, and the heritage of Algeria in the local market. So that was the question, and the options were to say yes, there are enough, or for that matter, no, there is not enough, but the responsibility is on the government or on the people, on the elite. So I will share with you guys the results now, and we will try to comment them. So you can see on the top right hand the answer. So we had almost 100 votes, 96 exactly. Most of the people, almost half of the people, 48%, think that there are not enough games, and the responsibility is on the elite. When I say elite, I'm thinking of people, subject matter experts in the field of culture, history, or for that matter, gamers, people who know the history and who could take on themselves such initiatives. Quarter of the people, 25%, think that the state has a role to play on it, of course. And I'm surprised that almost a third of the people think that there are enough games. For those who have replied that there are enough games, the 30% or 27%, I would be delighted to see if they can comment about the games they know about, which they think, for that matter, they are enough. So, Roberta, what do you think about those answers, and what, of course, in relation of what you see worldwide or in the countries you have worked on?
I think that, generally we're seeing games are being made by people who are interested in whether it's playing the games or in telling those stories. And so these answers in your poll totally track with that. I think that there's only so much that you can fit into like an education of a child going through school or whatever. And so every time we have opportunity to like give new perspectives and learn new things in a more social way that's outside of those institutions, that's really positive. And I think a lot of folks are looking for that. So yeah, that tracks to me.
Excellent. Well, guys, with that, I think we have covered what we had in mind to cover. Again, I will look at a couple of, there are not many questions. There is one small question for me, which says, is it a game or a book? A game. So we spoke about both today. So we spoke about an existing game, which is the red Bernos. And we spoke also about the opportunity of creating a game about our book, The History of Algeria in 54 object. And there is an interesting comment, Roberta, I will share with you, and we will try to conclude with this. So Mohammed is saying that he thinks that the government builds museums, theaters, cinemas, and the elite should work on the shows, write books, create movies, and so on, which I definitely agree with. What do you think?
I think that's a really great way of putting it, and there's a lot of truth in that for sure.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So the state, the government has to build the infrastructure, but it's the role of people to take such initiatives. I think I have covered all what I had in mind. Roberta, if you would like to say last word, please.
For sure. Well, I really appreciate you having me. It's been a lot of fun having this conversation, and talking to folks in Algeria is really neat. And so yeah, I look forward to seeing what you do in the future, and maybe we'll make a game. Absolutely.
No, definitely we will explore this opportunity really deeply. on my side, again, it was really a honor to have you. This is the first time in Jazair Hope we do a live on such topic. As you have certainly guessed, we talk a lot about Algeria. We try to talk about Algeria in a positive way, and such initiatives like the Red Burnous game is one of the things we love to display in our platform. So I make a call to the people who are listening to us to broadcast about this Red Burnous game, to let people around them know about it. For those who can buy it, I think it's great to do so. And for those who have other ideas around similar topics, please feel free to reach out to me. We can discuss them. With that, I will thank you again, Roberta. We will definitely stay in touch, and I would like to thank the people who are following us for their constructive comments, their participation in the poll, and I would like to see you soon, maybe next week, in another topic in Jazair Hope. Thank you, guys, and see you soon. Bye. Bye, Roberta.
احنا الشعب اللي تمشى بالحفاظ، عالشوك عجلي وعلى النار.
بن بولعيد واسمه مصطفى، علي لابوانت وبدي عمر. القصبة ما زالها واقفة وما زالوا عساس الدار، ما زالها سعلة السقيفة وما زالها حرمة الجار. أنا يا بلادي راني عارف، هما ما كانوش عارفين.
دهشوا نهار علي ما توقف، احنا عادتنا نموت واقفين. نموت على النيف والشرف، نموت على الوطن والدين. علمنا بلا ريح يرفرف، احنا هما الجزائريين. أنا يا بلادي على بالي، هما ما كانوش فاهمين.
حبوا يديو البلاد ديالي، حسبونا ماناش قادرين. فكتهم حسيبة بن بوعلي الجميلة تنسى الآخرين. من حقك يا الجزائر تولولي ولدتي نساو رجال حرين. أنا يا بلادي سمحيلي، ما قدرتش نذكرهم كاملين.
واش نذكر واش نخلي، شهداء رواحهم طاهرين. مازالهم في قلبي وفي بالي، ربي يرحمهم أجمعين. والقصبة مازالها ديالي، وسط الدار والعرس واقفين.
معليش يا القصبة وريلهم،
قرصان رياس وساطيل، على عروج وخير الدين احكي لهم.
وفهم الناس اللي جاهلين،
باللي الجزائر ماهيش ليهم، ولادها مازالهم عايشين في وسط الناس. كيفاش تعرفهم الشدة ديما متحدين.
باللي الجزائر ماشي ديالهم، ولادها مازالهم عايشين في وسط ناس كيفاش تعرفهم في الشدة ديما متحدين.